reborn to when my sister and I were lost, this time. I walked past the unconscious man. Play the full story in one go. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. The exciting story begins right now. Cold rain drummed against the broken green tiles of the ruined temple, and leaking droplets struck the dust-covered altar with a dull, rhythmic thud. I snapped my eyes open, my chest still throbbing with the phantom pain of a blade piercing through it. As I gasped for air, my vision gradually cleared from a blur, and the air was thick with the smell of damp mold and a faint hint of blood. This scent, this scene, it dragged me violently back from the abyss of hell to the world of the living. I wasn't dead. I had actually returned to the very day my elder sister, Yunjin, and I were stranded in the countryside after being set up by our stepmother, Lady Lu. "Ashu, are you awake?" A gentle yet weary voice drifted into my ears. I turned my head stiffly, meeting my elder sister's eyes, which were brimming with worry. Her hair was styled in a slightly disheveled double bun, and her once fair, delicate face was now stained with a bit of grime. The plain silk dress she wore was torn in several places, yet it could not hide the innate grace in her bones. "Sister," I murmured, my throat dry and aching. It was truly her, vibrant, alive, and not yet torn to pieces by that pack of wolves. "You were having a nightmare just now. You kept breaking out in a cold sweat." Yunjin pulled out a somewhat coarse handkerchief and gently wiped my forehead. Suddenly, her movements stiffened, and her gaze shifted past my shoulder toward the half-open, broken wooden door of the ruined temple. By the dim light of the sky, a dark figure lay sprawled abruptly among the weeds near the threshold. It was a man dressed in black martial attire, with most of his body hidden in the shadows. The lapels of his robe at the abdomen and shoulder were soaked through with blood, which flowed onto the ground with the rainwater, forming a startling pool of dark red. It was Huiyuan, the beast who, in my previous life, had been kindly saved by us sisters, only to return our favor with malice once he rose to power, conspiring with the Liu clan to drive the Yun sisters into a desperate dead end. "Ashu, look over there." Yunjin's voice carried a hint of a tremble. She was kind-hearted by nature and could not bear to see others suffer. Even though she was currently in distress herself, her instinct was still to stand up and investigate. "That man seems to be gravely injured. If we leave him be, I'm afraid he won't survive the night. Let's see if we can help." "Don't go over there." I lunged forward and grabbed my elder sister's wrist with a death grip. My fingertips turned pale from the sheer force of my grasp. Yunjin was startled by my sudden ferocity and looked at me in bewilderment. "Ashu, you're hurting me." I took a deep breath, forcibly suppressing the surging murderous intent and hatred in my heart. I softened my tone, but I didn't loosen my grip on her hand in the slightest. "Sister, look closely at the wounds on his body." Yunjin followed my gaze. Despite the dim light, the several neat and deep gashes on the black robe were still clearly visible. "Those are sword wounds," I whispered, my voice so calm it even surprised me. How could an ordinary person sustain such severe injuries? He is either a desperate criminal or someone being hunted by enemies. We are two weak women with nothing to our names, barely able to look after ourselves. If his enemies follow the blood trail and find us saving him, do you think, sister, that men who kill with blades will stop to listen to our explanations?" Yunjin's face turned deathly pale upon hearing this. Though soft-hearted, she was by no means foolish. We were the legitimate daughters of the Yun family in the capital. However, after our mother passed away early, our stepmother, Lady Lu, had made life difficult for us in every possible way. On this trip back to our ancestral home to pay our respects, Lady Lu had bribed the carriage driver to abandon us in this desolate wilderness, clearly intending to use bandits to make us disappear without a trace. We can barely save ourselves now. What right do we have to indulge in acts of mercy? But, are we just going to stand here and watch him die? Yunjin bit her lower lip, a flicker of struggle crossing her eyes. Life and death are matters of fate. I looked coldly at the unconscious Huiyuan lying on the ground, my gaze devoid of any warmth. What we need to consider now is how to make it back to the capital alive to ask our dear stepmother why she has driven us to such a dead end. "Sister, it is not worth risking our lives for a dangerous man of unknown origins." Yunjin looked at me, seemingly sensing an unusual decisiveness in me today. But she eventually nodded. She squeezed my hand and said softly, "Aishu is right. I wasn't thinking clearly. We must leave this place immediately." "Yes. Let's go now." I stood up immediately and briefly tidied my disheveled clothes. There was nothing to pack in the ruined temple. Our only travel funds were in a small bundle my elder sister had risked her life to protect during that accident on the road. Inside were only 2 mediocre pearl hairpins and a few pieces of broken silver. As I passed by Hui Yuan, he let out a low groan of pain. His brows were tightly knit, and his originally handsome face was as pale as paper due to excessive blood loss. To an uninformed observer, he would surely look like nothing more than a distressed young nobleman fallen on hard times. I paused and cast a cold, condescending glance down at him. Images from my past life flashed through my mind. He had collapsed in a pool of blood just like this. Back then, my sister had torn the hem of her undergarments to bandage him, and I had braved the torrential rain to pawn the jade pendant left by my birth mother just to buy his medicine. And the result? This man brings a bloodbath wherever he goes. My sister and I will never step into this murky water again. Without a moment's hesitation, I pulled Yunjin across the threshold of the ruined temple. Stepping into the cold mud, I walked into the continuous autumn rain without once looking back. The rain beat down on my body, bone-chillingly cold, yet it left my mind remarkably clear. From the ruined temple to the nearest town, Qingshi town, lay about 3 li of mountain paths. Yunjin and I supported each other, trudging through the mud with uneven steps. My elder sister's embroidered shoes had long since been soaked through, and blisters had formed on the soles of her feet, yet she gritted her teeth and didn't utter a single sound. I knew she was afraid of slowing me down. About an hour later, we finally caught sight of the archway marking the entrance to Qingshi town. The town was not large, but because it was situated near the official highway, there were many traveling merchants passing through. As the rain gradually subsided, street vendors had already begun setting up their stalls one after another. "Ashu, let's stop and rest at the inn up ahead." Yunjin could truly go no further, her face deathly pale. I scanned our surroundings, my sharp gaze sweeping over several street vendors whose attire seemed ordinary enough. Although they carried shoulder poles, their steps were steady, their eyes alert, and they had thick calluses on the webs of their thumbs, the kind left by years of gripping a blade. If I remembered correctly, these men were the secret agents hunting down Hui Yuan. "We can't go to a prominent inn," I said, withdrawing my gaze and pulling Yunjin toward a secluded alleyway. 2 women traveling alone would attract too much attention at a large establishment. "We'll go to the Chen family rest house up ahead. It's simple and crude, but it's filled with ordinary travelers, which makes it safer." Yunjin trusted me unreservedly, allowing me to lead her along. At Chen's guest house, we secured a bottom-tier room in the furthest corner for a small piece of broken silver. The room contained nothing but a hard wooden bed and a table with a chipped corner, but at the very least, it offered shelter from the wind and rain. The moment the door closed, Yunjin collapsed onto the bed, gasping for breath. I went to ask the shopkeeper for a basin of hot water, wrung out a cloth, and handed it to my elder sister to wipe her face. Meanwhile, I sat at the table, taking the 2 pearl hairpins out of our bundle and placing them before me. "Ashu, this bit of silver isn't even enough to hire a carriage to the capital." Yunjin regained her composure, looking at the pitiful travel expenses on the table with eyes full of worry. "If we were to write a letter back to the Yun Manor for help." "Absolutely not." I interrupted her immediately, my gaze narrowing. "Has elder sister forgotten how we ended up stranded here? That coachman was acting on Lu's orders. If we write back to the manor, the letter will undoubtedly fall into her hands first. By then, what arrives won't be a carriage to fetch us, but hidden weapons to silence us forever." Yunjin gasped, her hands instinctively clutching her handkerchief tight. Then what should we do? Father is far away at his post, and in the capital, everything is decided by mother, by that woman, Lu. Are we to be trapped to death in this small town? We won't be. I tucked the pearl hairpin into my sleeve and walked to the window, pushing it open just a crack. I watched the peddlers passing by below, the ones with thick calluses on their palms. A cold arc curled at the corner of my lips. Since the heavens have granted me a second life and delivered Huiyuan along with the power behind him right to my doorstep, how could I not make use of them, even if I have no intention of putting myself in harm's way? Rest well for now, sister, and regain your strength. I turned around, offering Yunjin my first reassuring smile since my rebirth. I will handle the matter of the silver and the travel permits. We set off for the capital first thing tomorrow morning. No one can take away what rightfully belongs to us. Though Yunjin did not understand why I had suddenly become so certain, the sight of my calm gaze gradually eased the anxiety in her heart. She nodded and lay down without undressing. Listening to my elder sister's breathing grow steady, I turned my gaze back toward the window. At this moment, Huiyuan should still be clinging to life in that ruined temple, while the people in town are searching everywhere for him like headless flies. As long as I sell the secret from the ruined temple to these people, I will naturally have the leverage I need to return to the capital. After confirming that my eldest sister, Yunjin, was fast asleep, I rose with light, cautious steps. The young girl in the bronze mirror looked somewhat disheveled. I put my outer robe on inside out and used cold tea mixed with incense ash to smear across my face, masking my naturally fair complexion and striking features. Then, I bound my hair tightly into the unremarkable bun of a common servant boy. Once finished, I pushed open the door and slipped out of the inn without a sound. The streets of Qingshi town felt damp and cold after the rain had stopped. I didn't wander aimlessly. Instead, I headed straight for the tea stall at the corner of the street, which offered the clearest vantage point. Just now, while upstairs, I noticed a burly man wearing a bamboo hat sitting here. A bowl of coarse tea sat before him, untouched, as his eyes swept across the town's entrance like a hawk. The carrying pole beside him held ordinary sundries, yet it was crafted from ironwood and exceptionally hard timber, far from what a common vendor would use to carry goods. I walked over and took a seat one table away from him, ordering the cheapest bowl of tea available. In the interval while the stall owner went to pour the tea, I lowered my voice and spoke in a calm tone audible only to the two of us. 3 miles outside the city, at the ruined city god temple, a traveler in black, with piercing sword wounds to the left shoulder and abdomen. He is currently unconscious with a high fever. The moment the words left my mouth, a faint, sharp creak came from the table beside me. The veins on the back of the man's hand bulged as he gripped his teacup. From the shadows beneath his bamboo hat, a pair of sharp eyes, burning with intense murderous intent, instantly locked onto the side of my neck. I had no doubt that if this weren't a crowded marketplace, his hidden weapon would have already slit my throat. I didn't turn my head, keeping my gaze fixed on the pitted surface of the table before me. My voice remained flat, without a hint of emotion. There is no need for such hostility. I am merely a passerby looking to make a living. Striking now would not only alert the authorities but also the group that just entered the town through the east gate. At those words, the man's murderous aura suddenly faltered. I knew I had gambled correctly. Little girl, you certainly have some nerve. He lowered his voice, which carried a chilling coldness akin to a venomous snake. What do you want? 50 taels of silver in cash, and 2 blank travel permits that allow for unimpeded passage through the capital. I picked up the hot tea the stall owner had just delivered and gently blew on the foam. This deal is quite a bargain for you. Not only can you secure your target before your rivals do, but you also save yourself the trouble of searching every single inn. The man fell silent for a moment. Weighing pros and cons was instinctual for secret agents like them who lived by the blade. Killing me would be easy, but if doing so attracted the Silver Eagle agents or, worse, allowed the target to escape, the consequences would be unforgivable. Fine. He pulled a heavy purse from his robes, along with 2 neatly folded travel permits stamped with official seals, under the cover of his wide sleeves. He pushed them gently toward the edge of the bench where the 2 tables met. Men like them, who spent their years carrying out assassinations abroad, were bound to carry multiple blank permits for forging identities. There is a hidden compartment beneath the altar at the back of the ruined temple. If he wakes and senses movement, he will surely hide there. I took the items and revealed my final card, then stood up and walked into the crowd without looking back. To prevent being followed, I circled through the town's crisscrossing alleys 3 full times. Once I was certain there were no tales behind me, I bought 2 sets of ordinary cotton dresses at a secluded tailor shop, shed my disguise, and returned to the Chin family inn. Pushing open the door, I found Eugene sitting anxiously by the bedside, her eyes rimmed with red. Seeing me return safe and sound, she sprang up and threw her arms around me. "Ashu, where did you go? I woke up and couldn't find you. I thought you had also been." "Don't be afraid, elder sister. Am I not perfectly fine?" I patted her back, pulled her down to sit, and emptied the contents of the money pouch and the travel permits from my bosom onto the table. The shimmering silver ingots and the 2 documents stamped with bright red official seals looked exceptionally striking in the dimly lit room. Yunjin's eyes widened in disbelief, and she pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. Where did all this come from? Ashu, you didn't do something foolish, did you? Rest assured, elder sister, this money is clean. I traded a piece of information for it with a passing wealthy merchant. I began sorting the silver and tucked the travel permits securely against my body, offering a simplified explanation. That merchant was in urgent need of a rare medicinal herb that I happened to have seen near the ruined temple, so I gave him directions. He was a generous man, and seeing us sisters in distress, he gave us this as a reward. Yunjin had always been simple-minded, and coupled with her unwavering trust in me, she breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing this, even though she found such luck a bit far-fetched. "There's no time to lose. We must leave here immediately." I gave her no time to dwell on the details. Half an hour later, I hired an inconspicuous mule carriage at the town entrance for 5 taels of silver. The driver was a simple, honest old man who traveled between the capital and the surrounding towns year-round. As the mule carriage slowly passed through the stone archway of Qingshi town, a sudden burst of rapid hoofbeats swept past from another road like a gale. I lifted a corner of the carriage curtain, coldly watching as the group of spies, disguised as merchants, tore off their facades, drew the frost-cold blades from their waists, and galloped furiously toward the ruined temple outside the city. Why such a sudden, massive commotion? Yunjin was startled by the sound of galloping hooves and instinctively leaned closer to me. "It's just some martial arts world grievances. It has nothing to do with us." I lowered the carriage curtain, blocking out the wind, rain, and slaughter outside. The mule carriage traveled further and further along the slightly bumpy official road, and the silhouette of Qingshi town gradually blurred behind us. I closed my eyes, and the image of the Yun Manor's vermilion, gold-lacquered gates surfaced in my mind, along with the hypocritical face of my stepmother, Lady Lu. By the time we arrived in the capital, evening was drawing near. The 2 vermilion, gold-lacquered gates of the Yun estate remained as imposing as ever, yet in my eyes, they resembled the maw of a beast concealing filth and corruption. Holding Yunjin's hand, I bypassed the side entrance. Instead, I ordered the driver to bring the mule cart to a steady halt at the foot of the main entrance steps and struck the bronze door rings with force. Old Li, the gatekeeper, poked his head out. Upon seeing us, he looked as if he had seen a ghost. The lantern in his hand nearly slipped to the ground. "ELD. Eldest miss? Second miss? How are you two? What? Do I need to notify you in advance to return to my own home?" I swept a cold gaze over him. Old Li trembled in fear, scrambling to throw the gates wide open. My elder sister and I walked straight toward the main courtyard. Just as we stepped into the yard, the brisk clicking of an abacus drifted from inside the house. Lifting the felt curtain, I saw my stepmother, Lady Lu, reclining on a luohan couch. She was toying with a kingfisher-inlaid gold begonia hairpins, smiling as she said to Nanny Sue beside her, "This set of jewelry is of excellent quality. Have the manager of Suehua Pavilion come tomorrow to give an appraisal. If the price is right, we'll add it to my private accounts." Mother certainly is in high spirits. I spoke coldly, stepping over the threshold. With a sharp clatter, the hair ornament in Lady Lu's hand struck the small side table. She jerked her head up, the color instantly draining from her exquisitely powdered face, unable to conceal the sheer terror in her eyes. Nanny Sue recoiled 2 steps in fright, looking as if she had just seen a soul-reaping specter. Chewer? Jeaner? Having spent years navigating the schemes of the inner household, Lady Lu managed to force a stiff smile and stepped forward. Weren't you two back in your ancestral village for the sacrifices? Why have you returned so soon? And where is old Wang? Why hasn't he come to report back? Yunjin instinctively gripped my sleeve, her knuckles turning white. I gently patted the back of my elder sister's hand and looked directly into Lady Lu's flickering eyes. My voice was calm, yet as sharp as a blade. Indeed, quite soon. I'm afraid old Wang won't be coming. There was an accident. Midway, the horses bolted, and old Wang went over the cliff along with the carriage. Not a bone remains. I deliberately emphasized the word accident. Lu Shi's breath hitched, and she forced a smile. How could such a tragedy happen? Then how did you two delicate girls manage to make it back? By the grace of heaven, naturally. I stepped forward, my gaze falling on the Wang Wallywood box containing the pure gold headpiece. We stumbled our way out of the barren mountains and happened to encounter patrolling officers from the Jingzhou prefecture. I have already filed a report with the authorities. The officers said they would head to the bottom of the cliff tomorrow to recover old Wang's body and, while they're at it, check if the carriage shows any signs of being tampered with. Upon hearing Jingzhou prefecture and check the carriage, Lu Shi completely lost her composure, her fingernails digging deep into her palms. Such a trivial matter. Why bother the authorities? A human life is at stake. How can it be a trivial matter? I cut her off, then shifted my tone. However, my elder sister and I have suffered a terrible fright and truly lack the energy to deal with those officers. If Mother can ensure we rest in peace and quiet, I will naturally go to the Yamen to withdraw the case, claiming it was nothing more than an ordinary accident. Mrs. Lu was no fool. She immediately grasped my underlying meaning. If she dared to act recklessly, I would expose everything regarding old Wang. If she was willing to back down, we would act as if this matter never happened. She gritted her teeth, forcing out a strained, motherly smile. It is enough that you have returned safely. Hurry back to your courtyard and rest. If you lack anything, just let Mother know. I do indeed lack a few things. I unceremoniously pulled the rosewood box into my arms. This dangling hairpin is part of the dowry left by my biological mother. I recall her saying before she passed that once my elder sister and I reached our coming-of-age ceremony, these items would be handed over for us to manage ourselves. Isn't that right, Mother? Mrs. Lu's eyes twitched, her heart aching so much it felt as if it were bleeding. Yet she could only nod. Yes. I was merely keeping them safe for you, fearing you were both too young. Now that we have faced life and death, we can be considered grown. We dare not trouble Mother any longer. I reached out and opened my palm, the keys to my biological mother's dowry warehouse, as well as the ledgers for those 3 flourishing shops. Please return them all, Mother. This is to prevent us sisters from becoming frightened and speaking recklessly when the government officials come to question us tomorrow, saying something about domestic unrest that might tarnish Father's official reputation. Using Father's career as a threat was the most lethal blow to Madame Lu's Achilles heel. Madame Lu stared intently at me, as if she were meeting her usually silent and reticent second daughter for the first time. After a long silence, she waved her hand dejectedly. With a pale face, Nanny Sue brought out a ring of brass keys and several thick ledgers from the inner chamber and handed them over. I took the items, felt their weight, and a satisfied, cold sneer curled at the corners of my mouth. Elder sister, let us go. As I turned to leave the main courtyard, the silence behind me was thick with suppressed malice. I didn't care in the least. Tearing off the mask today was only the first step. Madame Lu had suffered a loss in silence, and she would certainly not let the matter rest. But what of it? From this day forward, the rules of the Yin family's inner chambers will be set by me. Upon returning to the begonia courtyard where we sisters lived, Yun Jin finally let out a long, heavy breath, her forehead drenched in cold sweat. Shu, back in the main courtyard, I didn't even dare to breathe. How could you be so bold as to bluff her with reporting it to the authorities? If she had gone to the capital prefecture to investigate, wouldn't our ruse have been exposed? She wouldn't dare to check. I tucked the keys away securely and poured a cup of hot tea for my elder sister. Those with a guilty conscience are the ones who fear the officials most. Old Wang is her man. She is terrified that following the clues would lead back to her. She would avoid it at all costs. Why would she take the initiative to ask? Yunjin held the teacup, looking at the dowry ledgers reclaimed on the table, her eyes shimmering with tears. Ah Shu, you have truly grown up. Your mother's spirit in heaven will surely be comforted to see you so resolute. I lowered my eyelids, concealing the deep darkness within my gaze. What truly made me grow up was not a sudden epiphany between life and death, but rather the despair and pain that had seeped into my very marrow. Rest well, elder sister. We will have much to attend to tomorrow morning, I soothed softly. The next morning, before the early autumn frost and dew had even dissipated, I was already seated behind the red sandalwood desk by the window. Stacked neatly on the table were the 3 account books Lucia had handed over last night. Yunjin walked in carrying a bowl of bird's nest porridge. Seeing me flipping through the ledgers, she couldn't help but frown. Ah Shu, you've been looking at these since first light. Have you found anything noteworthy? Look at this, elder sister. I pointed to an entry in the ledger belonging to the Jubao Pavilion antique shop, my fingertip tracing lightly over the ink. A batch of Huizhou inkstones purchased last month was recorded as costing 500 taels of official silver. Yet only a mere 10 pieces were actually entered into the inventory. Even if they were tribute grade, there is no reason for them to cost 50 taels apiece. Lucia is treating the shop as her own personal purse, brazenly hauling away mountains of gold in broad daylight. Yunjin gasped. How does she dare? This is mother's private property. According to the laws of our dynasty, even father cannot use it at will. What wouldn't she dare to do? I closed the account book and let out a cold sneer. She is banking on the fact that we sisters are young and ignorant of business affairs. If I guess correctly, Qian Dafu, the manager of Jubao Pavilion, has long since become her loyal dog. In my past life. I paused mid-sentence. In my past life. A sudden fire broke out at Jubao Pavilion 6 months later. Not only did it burn all the valuable antiques to ashes, but it also affected the neighboring properties. Madame Lu took the opportunity to sell the land at a rock-bottom price, while in reality, she had secretly transferred all the assets, completely hollowing out the foundation my mother had left behind. In this life, I will never let her have her way. Eldest sister, change your clothes. We are leaving the manor. I stood up, my eyes cold as ice. It's time to go and meet this manager Qian. Half an hour later, the carriage pulled up in front of the treasure pavilion in the bustling downtown district. The shop was deserted, with several clerks leaning against the counters, dozing off. Seeing us enter, they lazily approached. What can I get for you 2 young ladies? Called Qian Dafu out. Ignoring the clerk, I walked straight to the grandmaster chair in the center and sat down, while Yunjin stood quietly by my side. The clerk froze for a moment, seeing that my clothes, though simple, could not hide an air of nobility. He dared not be negligent and hurried to the backyard to fetch his master. Before long, a pot-bellied middle-aged man walked out rubbing his hands. A sharp glint flashed in his eyes as he put on a face full of fake smiles. Oh, it's the eldest miss and the second miss. What rare guests. Why didn't you send word in advance so I could have gone to the manor to welcome you both? There is no need for a welcome. I am simply here to audit the accounts. I tossed the tampered ledger onto the tea table with a sharp thud. Qian Dafu's expression stiffened, but he quickly regained his composure. With a hollow smile, he said, "The second miss must be joking. The accounts for this shop are sent to the madam's courtyard on time every month. Clear as day. Why should the 2 of you trouble yourselves to come and check them personally? The madam's courtyard? Shopkeeper Qian must be getting senile in his old age." I picked up my teacup and brushed aside the tea foam, not even bothering to lift my eyelids. The deed to this shop bears my birth mother's surname. Now that I have taken over the shop from her hands, the owner has changed. Qian Dafu's face finally darkened, and he let out a cold snort. Second miss. I was promoted by the madam herself. If you insist on interfering by force, I'm afraid I won't be able to control the staff or the supply chains of this shop. If the shop ends up closing and the master lays the blame, That 3-entry courtyard you purchased in Willow Alley on the west side of the city cost you 800 taels of silver. And that mistress you've been keeping there just bore you a son last month. I parted my crimson lips. My voice soft. Yet it struck Qian Dafu's ears like a clap of thunder. Qian Dafu's legs buckled, nearly sending him to his knees. His original arrogance vanished instantly, and beads of cold sweat erupted across his forehead. You. How do you know? I know more than just that. I set down my teacup, my gaze pinning him like a blade. I also know that the white jade guanine from the previous dynasty in the storehouse was swapped out by you long ago for inferior Shiyan jade. The authentic piece is currently sitting on the altar in your mistress's home. That was a capital offense. Stealing a precious treasure from one's master was punishable by exile of 3,000 miles under the law. Second miss. Have mercy. Second miss. Have mercy. Qian Dafu finally broke down, collapsing to his knees with a thud and kowtowing repeatedly. It was all the madam's doing. Madam said this shop would be hers sooner or later. I was forced into this. Shut up. I frowned in disgust. Make up for the embezzled silver within 3 days. Then take your people and get out of Jibao Pavilion. Otherwise, the bailiffs from the capital prefecture will be at Willow Alley tomorrow to make arrests. Do I make myself clear? Crystal clear. I'll get right on it. Qian Dafu acted as if he had received a divine reprieve, scrambling out of the room on all fours. Having dealt with Qian Dafu with swift and decisive action, I promoted an old appraiser, someone I knew thoroughly from my past life who had been suppressed by Qian Dafu, to take over as manager. After a combination of stern warnings and shows of favor, the atmosphere throughout Jibao Pavilion shifted instantly. Just as I was preparing to leave with the cloud-patterned brocade, a tall, pitch-black horse suddenly came to a halt outside the door. A man dressed in a dark purple brocade robe dismounted and strode into the shop. He was tall and slender, with a handsome face that carried an air of cold, detached melancholy. Most striking of all was the silver waist token hanging from his belt. Boldly engraved upon it was a majestic eagle with outspread wings. The silver eagle token! My heart skipped a beat, yet I kept my expression calm. Pulling Yunjin aside, I assumed the posture of an ordinary young lady of a noble household avoiding a potential confrontation. The man did not look at us, but walked straight to the counter and tossed a blood-stained cloth bundle onto the table. His voice was deep, like the low notes of a cello, yet carried a chilling murderous intent. Pawnbroker, take a look. How much is this jade pendant worth? The old pawnbroker opened the bundle with trembling hands. With just one glance, he began to shake uncontrollably with fear, standing slightly behind and to the side. My gaze drifted over the man's shoulder and fell upon the bundle. It was a mutton fat jade pendant carved with a double fish motif. The jade was warm and lustrous, but a corner was missing from its edge, and it was stained with dried, dark red blood. My breath suddenly hitched. That was Hui Yuan's personal jade pendant. In her past life, he had cherished it as a precious treasure and never let it leave his side. This, my lord, this jade has been tainted by bloodshed. This shop really. Before the old pawnbroker could finish his sentence, the man coldly interrupted him. At the ruined temple outside the city, a fire burned a few pieces of trash to cinders. This jade was found in the ashes. The man's slender fingers tapped lightly on the counter, his tone nonchalant, yet seemingly laden with hidden meaning. I heard there's a girl who sells information. He was testing her. The secret agents in Qingshi town have finally clashed with those from the Silver Eagle Medallion. Hui Yuan's fate remains unknown, and these bloodhounds have already followed the trail, turning their gaze toward the capital. I lowered my eyes and gripped my handkerchief tightly, suppressing the turbulent waves in my heart. Taking Yunjin by the hand, I stepped across the threshold of the treasure pavilion with a composed pace. Only after the carriage pulled away from the treasure pavilion intersection did I slowly lean my tense back against the carriage wall. Ah Shu, why are your hands so cold? Yunjin keenly sensed my abnormality, grasping my hand in return and asking with concern. It is nothing. Establishing my authority in the shop just now was simply a bit draining. I lowered my gaze, completely concealing the turbulence within my eyes. That blood-stained double-fish jade pendant lingered in my mind, refusing to fade. In my past life, it was with that very pendant that Hui Yuan reclaimed his lineage. becoming the long-lost eldest grandson of the Duke of Jin's estate and beginning his meteoric rise to power, now that the pendant has fallen into the hands of the Silver Eagle Death Soldiers. It means that even if Hui Yuan escaped the fire at the ruined temple, he certainly did not emerge unscathed and may have even lost his token of identity. However, that man with the blade has clearly realized that the errand boy selling information in Qingshu town has connections to the capital. I must gain absolute control over the inner household of the Yun estate and forge it into an impenetrable fortress before they come knocking at my door. Upon returning to the Yun residence, I had just stepped through the festooned gate when I saw Rouge, my father's personal attendant, waiting outside the moon gate with an anxious expression. "Second miss, you're finally back. The master has returned from court and is throwing a terrible temper in Ronghe Hall. The madam has cried until her eyes are swollen. Please, go and take a look." A cold, sharp curve touched the corners of my lips. Lu was truly unable to restrain herself. She had barely handed over the account books before rushing to lodge a malicious complaint with my father. "I understand." I patted my elder sister's hand to reassure her. "Sister, go back to your courtyard first. I will go see father." Inside Ronghe Hall, the atmosphere was frozen to a breaking point. My father, Yun Ting, sat upright in a Wangwali-wood armchair, his face as dark as still water. Madame Lu sat beside him, dabbing her eyes incessantly with a handkerchief. "My lord, I have managed the late madam's dowry on her behalf. Even if there is no credit to be claimed, there has certainly been hard work. Now, as soon as Shura returns, she seizes the keys without rhyme or reason, guarding against me as if I were a thief. If word gets out that I, as a stepmother, am mistreating the legitimate daughter of the first wife, how am I supposed to show my face among the circles of noble ladies in the capital?" I lifted the curtain and stepped steadily into the hall, dropping into a respectful curtsy. "Daughter offers greetings to father. So you still remember you have a father." Yun Ting slammed his hand onto the table, making the teacups rattle and clink. "The moment you return to the manor, you stir up unrest. You don't even show respect for your elders. Have all your lessons in etiquette been fed to the dogs?" I stood tall with neither arrogance nor humility, refusing to kneel. Instead, I drew the tampered account book from my sleeve and presented it with both hands. "Father, please calm your anger. I did not take back the keys out of disrespect for mother, but rather to preserve your reputation and perhaps even your life." As soon as these words were spoken, Yun Ting's expression shifted drastically, and even Lady Lu's sobbing caught in her throat. "Stop this alarmist talk. How could a mere set of household keys possibly involve my life?" Yun Ting barked with a frown, yet a flicker of apprehension clearly flashed in his eyes. "Father, please look at this ledger." I flipped to the page concerning the treasure pavilion, my voice calm yet every word striking a nerve. "On paper, this shop is part of mother's dowry, but to the outside world, it is known only as a Yun family business. The manager, Qian Dafu, has been embezzling funds and substituting quality goods with inferior ones. He even went so far as to swap out a white jade guanyin bestowed by the previous dynasty. If the censorate were to submit a memorial accusing you of failing to manage your household and allowing domestic servants to bully the market, how would you fare, father, especially now during the capital's official performance review?" Yun Ting snatched the account books and scanned them rapidly, his face turning increasingly livid. This is impossible." Madame Lu panicked and stood up abruptly. "That Qian Dafu has always been dutiful. How could he?" "Not only that." I cut her off directly, my gaze piercing through her. "Shopkeeper Qian purchased a 3-entry mansion in Willow Alley on the west side of the city to keep a mistress. Whose money did he use? He confessed personally this morning that he only dared to hollow out the shops because he was acting under his master's instructions. May I ask, Mother, since you review these accounts every month, were you truly completely unaware?" Madame Lu's legs gave way, and she collapsed back into her chair, her face devoid of color. Yun Ting was a shrewd man who had navigated the treacherous waters of officialdom for years. How could he fail to see the trickery at play? He slammed the account books down at Lady Lu's feet in a rage, pointing at her nose and cursing. "You foolish woman! How could you be so short-sighted as to let such a lethal weakness fall into someone else's hands?" "My lord, Please see the truth. I truly had no idea that wicked servant would be so audacious. Lady Lu prostrated herself on the ground, weeping bitterly, stripped of every bit of the arrogance she had shown while making her accusations just moments ago. Father, I said, softening my voice at the opportune moment to offer him a way out. Family scandals should not be aired in public. I have already dealt with Qian Dafu, ordering him to make up the deficit and get out of the shop. I have suppressed this matter, so it will certainly not affect your official performance review. My taking over the private assets is also to share your burdens, Father, and to prevent such filthy business from happening again. You have done well. Yun Ting took a deep breath, straightened the lapel of his official robe, and delivered the final verdict. From this day forward, you shall manage your birth mother's dowry yourself. Lady Lu has shown poor judgment and character. She is to be fined 6 months' salary and confined to her courtyard to reflect on her mistakes. She is not to leave without my command. Master, Lu Shi let out a shrill cry, but she was forced back into silence by Yun Ting's cold, ruthless gaze. Having finished dealing with the matters in the main hall, I had just returned to Begonia Court when I spotted Chuer, a second-class maid responsible for sweeping, peeking stealthily over the courtyard wall. What are you looking at? I walked up behind her soundlessly. Chuer jumped in fright and hurriedly turned to bow, stammering, reporting to second miss. A strange bird flew in just now and perched on the wall. I thought it looked unusual, so I was just watching. A strange bird? I frowned slightly, looking in the direction she was pointing. On the green bricks atop the wall, several sharp claw marks were clearly visible. Even more alarming was a nearly imperceptible silver feather, its edges glinting with a cold light, embedded in the moss within the crevices of the wall. The night grew deeper, and a deathly silence hung over the Begonia courtyard. I dismissed Chuer, who had been on the night watch, and sat alone before the canopy bed, trimming the flickering candle wick. On the small red sandalwood carved table outside the bed sat the steel feather arrow I had pried from the wall crevice during the day. Knock, knock. 2 faint taps sounded against the window lattice. Before I could make a sound, the tightly shut sliding doors were pushed open silently by a gust of cold wind. Yet the candle flames in the room did not flicker even slightly. A tall, dark silhouette merged into the shadows within the doorway like a phantom. Immediately following, a point of icy cold steel pressed noiselessly against my throat. Second Miss Yun, you have quite the nerve. A deep voice rang in my ear, carrying a heavy scent of blood. By the faint candlelight, I recognized him. It was the man in the purple robe with the silver eagle plaque hanging from his waist, the one I had seen earlier today at the Jubao Pavilion pawnshop. The blade pressed against my skin, sending a shiver through me. I didn't struggle. I even kept my breathing steady, merely lifting my eyelids slightly to look past the spine of the sword. I met his gaze calmly. Did your excellency break into the inner chambers of a 4th-rank imperial official in the dead of night just to praise my courage? The man's eyes turned cold instantly, and the blade pressed a fraction closer, drawing a hairline streak of blood across my neck. Cut the nonsense. You were the one who sent word about the fire at the ruined temple. He stared into my eyes as if trying to see right through me. Is the eldest grandson of the Duke of Jin alive or dead? If you get even half a word wrong, I'll make sure you die of illness in these ladies' quarters without anyone being the wiser. The Duke of Jin's estate. In his previous life, Hui Yuan had returned to his family, taking command of the Duke of Jin's 300,000 Iron Cavalry, and wielded power that dominated the imperial court. The Silver Eagle Death Guards before me were the sharpest hidden blade left behind by the late heir of the Duke of Jin, loyal only to the bloodline, not the throne. Your blade is fast, but you've pointed it at the wrong person. Ignoring the stinging pain at my neck, I picked up my teacup and took a sip of cold tea to mask the cold sweat in my palms. The ones hunting him that day were death guards secretly harbored by the South City Military Command, using sleeve arrows dipped in snake venom. If I wanted to harm him, why would I go through the trouble of dragging him out of the inferno and painstakingly erasing his blood trail along the way? The man's brow furrowed slightly, yet the hand gripping the sword remained as steady as a mountain. Words are wind. How do I know you aren't in league with those assassins, intentionally imprisoning him to gain leverage over the Duke's manor? You have no choice but to trust me. I looked him straight in the eye, my tone neither heavy nor light, yet every word struck a chord in his heart. He was poisoned by the arrow and inhaled thick smoke. Without the cold cliff grass I found to sustain his life, he wouldn't have survived the night. That doublefish jade pendant wasn't something I overlooked. He tore it off and pressed it into my hand before he lost consciousness. As a token for future verification. It was a lie, but it was also the most airtight logic. Hui Yuan was suspicious by nature. Unless he allowed it himself, no one could ever get close to him. Sure enough, a flicker of hesitation flashed in the man's eyes. Keenly seizing upon this momentary weakness, I threw out my final bargaining chip. On his left shoulder blade, there is a crescent-shaped birthmark. Since you are a trusted confidant sent by the Duke, I presume you wouldn't be unaware of this. The man's pupils constricted slightly, and the longsword pressed against my neck finally withdrew by a fraction. The matter of the birthmark was an absolute secret. In my past life, I had only caught a fleeting glimpse of it by chance while changing his clothes after he had fallen into a heavily wounded coma. Once these words were spoken, they served as ironclad proof. What do you need? He was a clever man and immediately understood my intent. A young lady from a sheltered household would never risk a capital offense to save the bloodline of the Duke's manor out of mere kindness. Clever. I walked to the desk, took out a pre-written note, folded it, and handed it to him. I wish to borrow your men. Though the inner quarters of the Yun household are small, there are those conspiring with outsiders who seek the lives of my sister and me. 3 days from now, during the blessing ceremony at Han's Han Temple outside the city, I will lure them out. When the time comes, I ask that you close the net for me. The man took the note and tucked it into his robes without even looking at it, saying coldly, "It is a deal. 3 days from now, if I do not see my master safe and sound, not a single soul, not even the dogs or chickens, will be left alive in the Yin household." With that, his figure flickered, and just as he had arrived, he vanished silently into the night. The window closed once more, and it was as if nothing had ever happened in the room. My tense back finally relaxed, and I slumped onto the Luo Han couch, gasping for breath. I had won the gamble. By leveraging the information gap from my past life, I had successfully transformed the Duke of Jin's estate, the sharpest blade in the realm, into my own trump card to break the deadlock. The next morning, Nanny Sue from Lady Lu's courtyard arrived under the pretext of checking on her health, delivering a formal invitation. Holding the invitation, Yunjin looked deeply troubled. "Ah Shu, though mother is under house arrest, she managed to get the old matriarch to issue an order. It says that since we survived a great disaster, we must go to Han's Han Temple to fulfill our vows. This is clearly the fox inviting the hen to dinner. There is bound to be a trap on the road." I took the gold-flecked red invitation, my fingertips tracing the calligraphy as a cold, murderous intent flickered in my eyes. "Don't be afraid, elder sister." I tossed the invitation onto the table and sneered. "The debts of our past lives and the grudges of this one, it is time to settle them all at Han's Han Temple. Since she has already set the stage, how could we possibly refuse to play our part in this grand drama?" The official road leading to Han's Han Temple was lined with trees heavy with deep frost. As the carriage reached Falling Goose Valley halfway up the mountain, it jolted violently and came to a sudden halt. From outside came the driver's panicked cry. "Who are you? What do you think you're doing, elder sister? Stay in the carriage and don't make a sound." I pressed down on Yunjin's trembling hand, tucked a defensive dagger into her sleeve, and lifted a corner of the curtain to peer out with cold eyes. A dozen masked men wielding glinting machetes had already surrounded the carriage. The scarred leader gave a sinister laugh. "Blame only yourselves for standing in someone else's way. When you reach the underworld, don't blame me for being ruthless. Do it." In my past life, it was this very group of men who ambushed and killed my elder sister here, driving me off the cliff. The Lu clan reported our deaths to the outside world as a mere encounter with mountain bandits, airily erasing every trace of our existence from this world. But in this life, before the blades could even fall, the sound of something slicing through the air suddenly rang out. Swoosh, thud. Several steel sleeve arrows pierced through the morning mist like lightning, accurately skewering the throats of the leading thugs. Before their screams could escape, Several figures clad in black leaped from the treetops like specters, amidst the flash of blades and shadows of swords. In just a few breaths, time, over a dozen fierce bandits lay scattered in pools of blood. The man in purple robes stepped over the blood-soaked ground, dragging the scarred man by his dislocated jaw. He approached the carriage and said, "Second Miss Yun, here is the witness you requested." "My thanks to you, sir." I stepped down from the carriage and glanced at the ashen-faced man before retrieving a heavy silver ingot from his vest. On the bottom of the ingot, the private seal of the Yun household's official treasury was clearly stamped. The evidence was irrefutable. Half an hour later, at Rongha Hall, when the scarred man, bound as tightly as a rice dumpling, and that blood-stained official silver ingot were tossed onto the blue brick floor, my father Yun Ting's hand jerked violently, and the teacup he had just lifted shattered into pieces. What is the meaning of this? Father recognizes this silver, doesn't he? I looked directly at Yun Ting, my voice cold and clear. Nanny Sue from Mother's courtyard took silver from the Yun household's public funds to the black market outside the city to hire an assassin, intending to hack my elder sister and me into 10,000 pieces. Had I not been fortunate enough to be rescued by passing guards from the Duke of Jun's estate, I fear the prefect of the capital would be here by now, holding this private seal of the Yun family and inviting father to the yamen for tea. The Duke of Jun's estate? Yun Ting gasped, his face turning deathly pale. Murdering a legitimate daughter was already a grave crime, but if those ruthless figures from the Duke of Jun's estate were involved, his official career would be well and truly over. Nanny Sue, who had been held aside, was already paralyzed with terror. She cowed out incessantly, crying out, "Master, have mercy! It was the madam who forced me to do it." She said the second young lady had usurped the household authority and was a menace that had to be eliminated. "You poisonous woman! You vile creature!" Yun Ting's eyes were bloodshot with rage. He turned and delivered a resounding slap, striking Lucia squarely across the face as she collapsed weakly on the ground upon her arrival. Half of Lucia's face swelled instantly, and blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. She clung to Yun Ting's leg in desperation, sobbing, "Master, I was merely confused for a moment. I have borne you a son. You cannot treat me like this." To preserve the reputation of the Yun family and father's official career, I stepped forward, blocking Lucia's gaze toward Yun Ting, my voice devoid of any warmth. "Mother has suddenly fallen gravely ill, and should be sent to Taijian Temple outside the city to recuperate. She is not to return to the capital without a summons. As for this treacherous servant, she shall be beaten to death." What does father think? Iron Threshold Temple was a place of death specifically meant for the confinement of disgraced noblewomen. Once inside, there was absolutely no possibility of coming out alive. Yun Ting looked at me, a flicker of horror crossing his eyes. But in the end, he merely closed them in dejection and spat out a single word through gritted teeth. "Fine." The Lady Lu's shrill scream was stifled in her throat as she was dragged away by the coarse servant women. That face from my past life, the one that had looked down on me with the power of life and death, was finally, in this life, ground into the mud and crushed into dust. By the time the mess within the inner household was settled, night had already fallen. I came alone to a secluded courtyard in the southern part of the city, guided by the memories of my past life. This was the final hiding place where I had directed those men to find Hu Yuan. A man in purple robes was already waiting in the courtyard. Behind him, lying on a stretcher, was a pale-faced Hu Yuan, who was now out of danger. "The person you wanted has been captured as agreed. As for my master, I shall be taking him with me now." The man in purple gave me a deep look and performed an exceptionally formal cupped fist salute. "Wait." On the stretcher, the youth who had kept his eyes tightly shut suddenly spoke. Hu Yuan slowly opened his eyes, and those pupils, like cold stars, fixed steadily upon me through the darkness of the night. "Second Miss Yun, is it?" His voice was hoarse, yet it carried the innate authority of one born to rule. "You saved my life, and I, Hu Yuan, never owe favors. Keep this jade pendant." He weakly raised his hand, and the man in purple robes immediately understood, stepping forward to present the fish-shaped jade pendant with a missing corner to me. If the Yun household can no longer accommodate you one day, bring this to the Duke of Jun's manor. I promise you a lifetime of protection. Looking at the gravity in his eyes, I did not decline and reached out to take the warm, smooth jade. In my past life, this pendant was a symbol of his power. In this life, it has become a protective talisman I earned with my own hands. Thank you, Prince. However, from now on, my life shall be held in no one's hands but my own. I curtsied slightly, offering a salute as an equal, my tone composed. The carriage gradually drifted away, vanishing into the depths of the night. I stood alone in the courtyard, gazing upward. The blood-deep feuds and endless grievances of my past life finally dissipated entirely within this chilly early autumn breeze. The power of the Yun household was now in my grasp. My elder sister was safe and sound, and I was no longer the Yinshu who lived at the mercy of others. The dawn had broken. The story has come to an end. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to subscribe, like, share, and comment. Thank you.